Okay, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. It is about 6:31 and people may come in late, and that's fine. First of all, I want to welcome everybody to our program on ecotourism in the Great Plains. My name is Peggy Appler, and I am currently working as an AmeriCorps with Conservation Nebraska's Common Ground program. Conservation Nebraska is a statewide nonprofit that is dedicated to keeping our natural resources healthy. And one of the major ways we do that is through public education programs like the one that we are sponsoring with the Center for Great Plains Studies this evening. And we really appreciate all of the various organizations, including the Center for Great Plains Studies, that help us with our efforts to provide public education programs. Before I introduce our speaker, I'll just mention that your microphone and cameras are turned off. If you could put your questions in the chat box, we will address them at the end of the program, and a short survey will pop up at the end of the program as well. So we appreciate your taking a little bit of time to fill that out because it helps us with planning and funding issues. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Katie Nieland. Katie, I know, is a very interesting and accomplished person, but for purposes of this evening, we're going to keep the introduction short. She is the Associate Director of the Center for Great Plains Studies. She is also the leader of the Great Plains Ecotourism Coalition, which brings together ecotourism providers, supporters across the region. So I'll turn the program over to her and appreciate your taking the time to be with us.
Great. Thank you so much, Peggy. I really appreciate it. And it's exciting to talk to all of you here today. I get really excited about the concept of ecotourism and nature tourism in the Great Plains. So it's cool to know that other people are interested too. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the concept of ecotourism, how the Center for Great Plains Studies defines it, and how it really relates to conservation. And we're going to look at both in the Great Plains and around the globe to sort of get an idea of how other places are doing ecotourism and how we might bring that to the Great Plains. So first of all, this is how we at the center define the Great Plains. There's lots of different ways to define it. The center is an interdisciplinary and educational hub that cultivates awareness of and engagement with the diverse peoples, cultures, and natural environments of the Great Plains. If you're in Lincoln, you might know us best from the Great Plains Art Museum. It's a free museum. We're part of the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. And we have fellows and operations on all 4 campuses of the university. So this is our map. We basically cover the region from the prairie provinces in Canada all the way down to Texas, and basically in Nebraska, the Missouri River to the foothills of the Rockies. So that's our Great Plains. You can define it lots of different ways. And one thing that we know about the Great Plains is that historically it was grassland. So there's 3 big kind of major types. Many of you may know this: short grass, mixed grass prairie, and tall grass prairie. But it is one of the least protected biomes on the planet. There's less than 4% of the tall grass prairie left, and only about half of the original short grass and mixed grass prairie. And mostly this is because the land that was suitable for plowing has been plowed. So now the grassland that remains is mostly used for cattle. It's a working landscape. So you see more of that remaining intact in the western and middle part of the Great Plains. But also, as you know, the Great Plains is an amazing place worth protecting. I think it has this beauty that you really can't see from the interstate. And that's sort of what we're going to get at in nature tourism. It's a tourism that really is a deeper level of tourism than just like looking at something from a bridge or an overpass on the interstate, right? It's if any of you have been to the Sandhills or Chua Prairie, this picture is from the Willa Cather Memorial Prairie. It's a beautiful place to be, and you sort of get it when you stand in the prairie. So the Great Plains is really full of these beautiful places and amazing animals. Bison herds are thriving on several grasslands across the plains. Here in Nebraska, you can see them at a handful of different places. We have these amazing migrations, monarchs, sandhill cranes. You'll hear more about how ecotourism and sandhill cranes work together here in a little bit. And it's not all flat. As you know, we have these amazing geologic features. This is Toadstool Geologic Park in the northwest corner of Nebraska near Crawford, one of my favorite places in the state. Some super cool ecotourism opportunities around that area. So there's stuff worth saving, stuff worth seeing in the Great Plains. So we kind of came at this project from how can the center help do conservation when we're a small staff, we're not out there in the landscape, what can we do? We figure we can tell people about this cool place, tell stories, and focus on ecotourism as it relates to economics and conservation. So what is ecotourism? One of the goals for the center is to help conserve nature tourism is one method to get to that larger goal. So our definition of it is it's nature-based tourism and travel that improves the well-being of local communities. That's really key. Deepens one's engagement with nature and then conserves the environment. So all those three things together. So it's bigger than taking a stop at a rest stop and looking out at a bird. This is the type of travel that like stimulates curiosity and like interest in the natural world. It creates stewards of the land. It's like, remember when you have the feeling of exploring a park as a kid and watching like a hawk swoop down? It's like you feel like, wow, changed by this place. And when you step out into the middle of the sandhills, like that changes you as a person and like helps you want to protect this place when you have these intense or amazing experiences in it. So those are our goals for ecotourism. We just want to increase the appreciation for this place so people care about it. We want to work with landowners and public organizations to conserve the natural environment. And then we want to sustain and improve human communities through ecotourism. And we'll get into that in a little bit. So ecotourism sites are really like places where you can engage deeper. So it's like hiking, biking, camping, but also learning something. So there's some sort of element that connects the traveler to the land. Maybe there's some education or interpretation, signage, a guide. The education aspect of it allows people to like engage more deeply with the landscape and really takes that ecotourism to another level. Some people are even doing like ecotourism volunteering. So like you can go to a place and do activities that help sustain conservation initiatives. There's volunteer activities with a bunch of different places around, but it's really like focusing on the experience that is really important, that deep experience. Here in this part of the state, we also have a huge potential to like mix cultural and heritage and literary tourism with nature tourism. So there's opportunities to do a bunch of different kinds of tourism and string them together. So here are some ecotourism sites that we've worked with and are relatively close together. An example of how you could string together a tour, basically. So why ecotourism? Why does that work for the Great Plains? Well, Great Plains is, again, one of the least protected ecosystems on the planet. World Wildlife Fund said in 2020 alone, 1.8 million acres were plowed. The green part of this map is intact. The brown part is plowed and the red part is recently plowed just in the last few years. So there's a definite need to protect what remains of our natural land. And we like ecotourism to do that because it combines conservation with business and economics. And why that is important, especially in Nebraska, is because a lot of our land is privately held. So we don't have, large public lands to do nature tourism on. So we have to work with landowners for these opportunities so they can, sustain their families on the land, so they can live in these rural communities. We need to figure out a way to do tourism on these private lands that work with these landowners and make it a viable business for them. And we have some really good examples of how that is working in other places around the world, especially one that we studied quite a lot at the center, and that place is Namibia, a country in Southern Africa. And when that country gained independence in 1990, they decided to fully invest in conservation. It's one of the few countries in the world that actually has specific conservation language written into their constitution. So they saw tourism as an opportunity to both make money and maintain the environment at the same time. So the basic idea there is if they take care of the land, there are more animals there. And then when there are more animals there, there are more tourists there spending money. So it's like a full system of tourism coming to see the animals, and then them taking care of the environment to make sure that the animals are there. And this place in Namibia is a pretty good facsimile of the Great Plains, actually. We're both semi-arid grasslands. They raise livestock right alongside native animals. They have hooved animals that break up the soil. They have these wild foxes. So we've got our Great Plains animals there on the left and their African counterparts there on the right. So we traveled there to talk about and to learn about what makes ecotourism work there and how we could bring it back to the Great Plains. And we found a few major points that were sort of interesting. And the first one is a lot of community involvement. This is Chris Weaver from the World Wildlife Fund. He works with local tribes there to ensure that tourism benefits make it back to the community and not just the businesses that are run there. So they have a cool program where local tribes take some ownership in these conservation efforts because they see direct dollars in their pocket. So for example, if a tourism group sees 7 zebras on a tour, they actually are keeping track of how many animals they see, and then those animals, like they, consult a book and it's like, oh, okay, 7 zebras, that equals X amount of money that's going directly to the tribe. And then the tribe gets to make group decisions on what to do with that money. So like one group bought an ambulance for their community. One group put up a community center. So it's really interesting, and how everybody who lives and works on that landscape are really working together to make sure that tourism is viable there. So these are some of the people who worked at some of the tourism spots that we visited, as the housekeeper and the maintenance, the groundskeeper. And so through these kinds of group conservancies, Namibia has been able to increase their populations of wildlife, and they're actually, like, the locals are stopping poachers, like, because poaching is less money than they get through these tourism operations, which is really cool. And at least in the part of Namibia that we were in, there's not a lot of like elephants, tigers, lions. Like it's really Great Plainsy there, and they're still seeing amazing amounts of tourism. That's me. Okay, some animals there. So the cool part, little video of an oryx. We asked the tourists there if they were to come to the Great Plains, what would they want to see? And they needed a few things. They wanted stories. They wanted to learn about these big American stories, Great American Road Trip, Lewis and Clark, Native Americans, and they wanted a well laid out route. They have lots of time to do these things, but they need some sort of help to string some of these places together. And the other thing they said was that they wanted wide open spaces. These tourists were from Europe, and I think these two were from Scotland, and they were like, we just needed to get out of the congestion of the city. And I was like, well, the Great Plains, things we have a lot of space. Definitely they could, get some use out of the space in the sandhills, for example. So they want those wide open spaces. They want to feel like they're the only one on the planet. And definitely the Great Plains could do that. So they wanted, they had all these ideas about America and the Great Plains. They just needed a little bit of help kind of figuring out what to do. The other big thing we learned is that you need a local guide. You need a nature guide to answer questions, point out things, and they actually have a really cool guide program there that trains guides. So that's definitely a place where they had a leg up on us in the Great Plains. They had a really educated workforce that's specific to nature tourism. You could train to be a chef specifically for nature tourism sites, or a guide, or work maintenance and operations, that sort of thing. It was this model of business plus conservation that was so interesting, and had us thinking about, okay, how could we do this back home? How could we take some of these ideas and move them to the Great Plains? Yep, it's been growing for a long time there. So we talked with and worked with Professor Larkin Powell at the School of Natural Resources, and he developed a spatial model that predicted the potential of ecotourism by overlaying a map of rainfall with a map of places like the distance to cities and interstate highways and the proximity to other ecotourism operations, and tried to see like where ecotourism might work best. And then we looked at the rainfall map because if it's wetter, then the ground has probably been plowed for row crops. If it's drier, it's probably being used for cattle. And that's easier to do ecotourism on. And this is what he came up with. His models really suggest that sort of the northern and western parts of the Great Plains have the highest potential for nature-seeking experiences, and the ease to get to those places was really important. So we sort of looked at this map and tried to do a bunch of other research, and then pulled it all together in the Great Plains Ecotourism Coalition. So we think that ecotourism really can work much the same way in the Great Plains as it does with Namibia. There are some challenges, but it's definitely doable. And we wanted to find a way to support these activities and the conservation that they promote. So we started this coalition in 2014 as a home base for our ecotourism projects. We developed a map with the top 50 ecotourism sites in the Great Plains, and we'll drop that link in the chat later. And our mission was really to promote environmental conservation through ecotourism that built thriving communities. And, we're really like taking care of the land too. We weren't going to really look at nature tourism opportunities that were not sustainable for those landscapes. So we invited a bunch of businesses and nonprofits to join the coalition at no cost. And then we created a bunch of marketing materials, research, advertising, a website, all for them to use as they saw fit. We really thought like what we could do is to help tell stories, to make some beautiful posters to talk about how amazing this place is, and then get them some marketing help, because a lot of these ecotourism operators in the Great Plains have another business, like they're ranching or they're doing something. It's really hard to take care of land and do marketing and advertising and social media. So our hope is that with this collaboration, some of our partners can use what we've put together to make their work stronger. So right now we have 40 members. We just added one this week. I haven't even gotten them up on the website yet. But they're mostly in Nebraska right now, but some are in the wider Great Plains. And if you're a business or an organization doing some sort of ecotourism or supporting it in some way, like, you're in, as long as we check out your practices, and it's like a non-consumptive form of nature tourism. It's great. And we just sort of wanted to connect everybody under this banner. Then I created these posters. You may have seen them. They're up permanently in Morrill Hall, but they also traveled the state for a while. They're in the Durham Museum and a few other places. We wanted to use that WPA style of like old national parks posters to sort of give it a recognizable look and really inspire people to like get out there and see the Great Plains. Like, it's a really cool place. It's not just flyover country. So we did that. We also did a guidebook where we went and talked with 8 tourism businesses in the Great Plains and really got their stories and put them in this book on the left. And then just had a listing of all of the nature tourism opportunities on the right. So we also asked the coalition members, especially the for-profit businesses, what they needed from us. And they wanted, some information on liability. So we got a law professor to put together a book for them, to provide them with some background in the subject, because it's of great concern to some of those landowners. And then we conducted some research, like a crane economic impact study that looked at, how much money the crane migration brings into the Kearney Grand Island area, and found out some great information. This was in 2017. So we found that $14.3 million came into that community. Visitors spent just under $100 a day, and most of them came from other places. There's still a lot of challenges to doing this in the Great Plains. We lack a lot of the infrastructure that Namibians had to make travel and getting people to work out in rural areas possible. So the first one is like the Great Plains is really humongous. So it's hard to get people to all these different places without good options, without large airports. The other thing is there's, some inadequate staffing in rural areas, looking for restaurants, places to stay, just kind of depends where you are. And then another challenge is, like I said before, these landowners already have jobs that take up their time. They need support to do marketing, websites, and social media. And then the last challenge is that, there's a lot of marketing that still needs to be done to convince people to visit this place. I think it's incredible when you're standing in the middle of the sand hills or watching the cranes from a bird blind, but some people it takes a little convincing. I'm leading a group of 10 of my friends to the bird blinds at the end of the month. They're all from Nebraska and none of them have been there. So it takes us talking about ecotourism and like consciously spending our dollars in a way that supports these operations. But small changes can really make a big impact. Choosing our vacations with the local community in mind, talking about it, really like voting with our dollars, spending our dollars in these ways, in these places that matter. That's one method we have to make sure that nature sticks around in our state, especially in a state that is so privately held, not a lot of public land. So it's pretty important. So if you are interested, there are some URLs to check out. We have some of our research online. And I think we will drop a link in the chat about, yes, so there's some links in the chat right now that have, especially if you want to check out the route map, that has all 50 top ecotourism sites in the Great Plains with stars. And then we've also added all of our coalition members and some other excellent sites to check out. And we tried to string them together so you can like choose a route based on your location. Or what you want to do. So that's my song and dance about ecotourism. The center has many, many projects. This is just one of them, but we feel like it's an important one. So thanks for listening. And now I will take questions.
Thank you very much, Katie. That was really interesting.
Yeah.
When you went to Namibia, is it?
Namibia.
Namibia. Did they have hotels and so forth set up?
Yeah. They were small. And we sort of went to all sorts of different kind of levels of ecotourism there. We went to one
Yeah.
like that a family could afford, just from the local area, went to sort of like a medium one, and then went to like a very fancy one to see all the differences. And a lot of them were very kind of small, but the idea there was to charge more and do low volume, because they don't want 20,000 people roaming over the grasslands every day. It's too high volume for that landscape to hold. So they charged more and did smaller groups to maintain that sustainability for them. Good
Interesting.
question. Yeah.
If anybody has questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We're that's how we set things up.
Yeah.
I don't think we can open it up, but yeah, let me see here.
There is a link for the liability information. It is under that go.unl.edu/ecotourism.
Okay.
That page has a bunch of links to some scholarly articles, the map, and some other things. So that liability study is there. That's a huge problem and hurdle for a lot of landowners. They're worried, well, if I let people come on my land and they trip and fall, then I'm in trouble. So that's kind of it's a big issue here that is not as big of an issue in Namibia. So
yeah, probably not.
But it's a amazing system they have set up there. We, on our last venture into the city, to leave, we stopped at the restaurant where the chefs are training to then go out to these ecotourism operations. So like they're training, they make the food there, and then, after a year or so training, they'll be sent out to an ecotourism operation, and they'll do sort of like a cycle around the country. They'll cook at many different spots. It's really cool. It's all part of their school. They have like a university program just for ecotourism there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
In Nebraska, what would you say the biggest attractions are?
Yeah. So obviously the cranes is one, probably the biggest one that we have. It's absolutely spectacular if you've not been. But I think that it's also really fun to hook that crane trip to something else. So if you can, head north into the sandhills. It's kind of hard because crane season is a cold season. But also like a month later, you've got the prairie chickens will be doing their booming. And if you've not seen them, they're really cool. You can see them, I think, at Big Blue Ranch in southeast Nebraska and at Calamus Outfitters near Burwell.
Those are the biggest ones.
Yeah, and then I would say the northwest corner, that's where Toadstool is, has some awesome opportunities. There's a horse ranch out there where the woman who owns it will take you on a horse tour. That's really cool. And all these places are on that Google map that is linked in here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Okay, how do you find a way to engage more children and youth?
With ecotourism, yeah, I feel like they're the perfect age category for this. And I would say just starting them small with local experiences, like taking out to Spring Creek Prairie here in town, or even to like Mahoney State Park, just doing little bits of nature. But then the important thing is like learning about it as you do it. So like, this is this type of bird, or like, let's look at this tree. So I think, instead of just looking at something, if they can engage with something, like pick up these leaves and describe it and talk about it and things like that. At the center, we have an education coordinator who's amazing at this. So I don't have like a lot of ideas. But I think it's important to create stewards of the land. We have to get kids and all humans, all people out in nature as much as possible.
Does your education coordinator work with like the schools then, or?
Yeah, she does. Mhm.
Okay, I guess any other questions?
Yeah, if people,
Which
people are,
schools do you work in? Yeah.
I think right now she's working with Beyond School Bells, and I'm not sure what schools they're in. But definitely, if you're interested in ecotourism, checking out the map is cool, and then picking out some places that you might want to see, or picking out an animal you might want to see would be a good idea. Like if you want to see a bison, then you can, go to Pioneers Park or go to Crane Trust. Things like that, and just kind of learning about the animals might be a cool way to do it. But yeah, we also have a series of books at the center who that kind of focus on some of these animals. We have a book on bison, a book on birds, and a book on geology that all kind of focus on learning something about those species or landscapes, but then at the back is a guide on how to find these places and how to go visit these things. So
Yeah, and are these all available for free?
the posters, the posters are we sell them at our museum, at the Great Plains Art Museum. But yeah, if you want a digital copy, we can definitely get you that. We also have postcards, and all the funds we make on it go right back into the project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Lisa said the poster artwork is beautifully highlights. Oops. Our state. Thank you for this presentation. Another question, are there opportunities for college students to help promote ecotourism for this?
Yeah, I would say we're always looking for stories of people in nature. So if college students, if they have an experience and want to write about it, that's a good way to do it. Or to take photos and tag us. Like our goal is to really talk about the coolest parts of the state. So if you all are out in the state, tag us at UNO Great Plains. We're on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all the things. But yeah, so if people want to write pieces, or if they want to take photos or do art, like all of those, we'd be happy to share them, and that would be super awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious, what is the Starry Skies?
Oh yeah, that's one that highlights, actually this is a cool piece. We have one of the darkest night skies of any of the states, which is really cool. I think they have just awarded an international dark sky park, or they're working on it, up near Merritt Reservoir, which is where the Nebraska Star Party is every year. Another great ecotourism opportunity that's in July. It's just a bunch of astronomers, like amateur astronomers, out in by the reservoir near Valentine, and they'll let you like look at their telescopes and talk to you about the stars. So that one is kind of in reference to that particular event, which is a really cool opportunity, especially for kids. Like there's stuff you can do during the day. There's like talks and things, usually in the Valentine High School gym. And then at night, people go out and look at one of the darkest night skies in the country. Like there's no light out there. So you can see everything. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's lots of different ways to experience ecotourism in the Great Plains. If you don't want to like hike up a dusty mountain, that's okay. You can still watch the cranes from the boardwalk near Kearney, or just enjoy the night sky out in the rural areas. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, are there any other questions? We want to make sure we've answered any questions people have. I don't see anything. So
Okay.
Thank you very much, Katie. That was really informative. Oh, there's a short feedback study. If you wouldn't mind filling that out, we'd appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sounds great.
Yeah. Well, wait just a second here. Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
The thing
Good.
that I keep thinking about is like, if I go somewhere, I want to stay in a hotel.
Mhm, mhm. And there are some.
Yeah, I know it. Well,
Yeah,
Kearney,
it
that
just,
area is.
yeah,
Um,
they're harder to find.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are some.
Do, do they ever have winery tours?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think there are some.
Okay.
All right.
Do we have the survey filled out?
Okay, gonna exit out. All right. Well, thank you
Okay,
so
we're gonna
much.
exit. Thank you. We really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks a
Thanks,
lot.
Peggy. Thank
We'll
you.
see you later.